The Rugby Business Network is a global organisation that connects senior business people who put their resources back into the rugby community in a sustainable way. Our members share values, the values of rugby, and we connect them online or at our events. We can also make personal face-to-face introductions to business leaders who want to do larger deals together. Visit therugbybusinessnetwork.com and apply to become a member today.
Welcome to the Rugby Business Network podcast. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode, which is brought to you by CMME Mortgages. Now, for our listeners who are living in the UK, CMME Mortgages, they are a market leader when it comes to providing mortgage advice, which focuses specifically on clients with complex incomes like business owners, contractors, or even affluent professionals. Now, CMME Mortgages, they've been helping clients get the best possible mortgage since 2004, and they consider their clients' full financial situation. For more information, all you got to do is visit cmmemortgages.com/rugby and see how they could possibly help you. Now, as you know, there are a number of rugby charities which exist around the world, each with their own unique qualities and areas of interest. But there are very few which can compare to the School of Hard Knocks, and we are so privileged to be joined by the organization's CEO, Ken Cowen. Ken, we're so grateful to have you join us on the Rugby Business Network podcast to tell our listeners more about the charity and its incredible journey thus far. Thank you for taking the time.
It's great. It's great to chat to you. It's my privilege. It really is.
Brilliant. Now, Ken, I'm sure a number of our listeners have heard about or maybe even know someone who has completed the course at School of Hard Knocks. The concept behind the charity, I mean, it was created in 2007, but was only registered as a charity officially in 2012. For those who are not entirely familiar with the backstory of how the charity came into being, could you explain this? I mean, because you've been involved right from the start.
The charity it is an unusual way to start a charity. So most charities start as a charity, and then sometimes they can have a kind of business arm attached to that and so on. But we started with an idea when a local authority in quite a deprived area in England, in Northwest, in a borough called Knowsley, they came to me and some of my colleagues back then and said, we've got a bunch of young men who were unemployed and, to be perfectly frank, pretty determined to stay that way. A lot of them just had no intentions to get into the workplace. Some of them were involved in crime. Others were just at a pretty low ebb point in their life and just didn't think employment was the answer. And so they came to us and said that I worked for a training company at the time. They said, what can we do to address this issue? So I said almost too quickly, really. It's just kind of one of those whimsical comment as well. Short of doing national service in the army, they need to play rugby. And to my surprise, they just straight away said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's explore that one. So it wasn't long after that I put together a bit of a concept paper. I came to present it to them. And that's really how we started School of Hard Knocks. It was a course, an employment course, commissioned by a local authority to address unemployment. What I didn't realize at the time was just how holistic the whole thing was and how the benefits are much wider than just getting people a job.
So we know now then, Ken, as you mentioned, School of Hard Knocks, it uses sport, rugby in particular, to tackle these issues that are surrounding unemployment, crime, poor health, and assist the people to take that positive step forward in their lives. But how exactly does it work, Ken? Who approaches who? What's the process of how someone who is down on their luck, had a history of crime, get involved to get the help they need?
We actually have two audiences. We have two kind of beneficiary groups, if you like. One are adults who are long-term unemployed, and in the last few years we've been working a lot with children who are just on the cusp of permanent exclusion from mainstream education. So for the adult courses, it's just 8 weeks long, the course. We give people a challenge. We find them in the job centres, or sometimes different agencies will refer them to us. And it could be people from different charities, like a homeless charity, or people who have got problems with alcohol or drug addiction. Various different organisations might pick up the phone to us and say, look, can you work with such and such an individual? But by and large, we get our adult participants through our staff going into the job centres for a period of 3 or 4 weeks per course. And they will just literally approach people and say, look, I don't know if you're up for a challenge. We'd like to propose something a little bit different to you, because, of course, a lot of courses these guys go on to help them think about employment they're stuck in a classroom, it's breeze block, it's strip lighting, there's blinds across the windows, they can't get outdoors. And it just reminds them of school, and so they hate that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is offering something very different. It involves a combination of playing rugby with a curriculum which is shot through and supported by really well-established psychological theory to help people change the way they think about their futures and about their own behaviours. Half the day will be rugby training, and then the rest of the day will be spent chatting together, bit of lunch, a whole group session, then some one-to-one support. But here's the big thing. We say to these guys, many of whom have never played a game of rugby in their lives, and I know this because even just this week I've got the bruises on my arm right now to demonstrate. I went down and worked with some guys who are on literally their first ever morning of rugby, and they're completely bemused by the idea.
Wow.
And what we say to them is, guys, look, in 8 weeks' time, not only are you going to have trained a lot in rugby, but you're actually going to play a full contact game of rugby against an established league team.
Wow.
And what that does is really focus them very, very quickly. And it bonds them as a team very quickly as well, because we can say, look, this is not a course you can choose to drop in or out of. I mean, you've got to look around the guys in this room. You've got to commit yourselves to them. So for the first time, perhaps many of them, they're learning about responsibility, not just to themselves, but to other people. And it's a huge challenge. It's a physical challenge. It's an intellectual challenge. It's an emotional challenge. And then, of course, at the end of the 8-week course, we do play a game of rugby, and then we have a jobs fair where we try and introduce them to lots of employers. And they go on their way. We give them ongoing mentoring support. But really, I think the magic happens through the actual rugby playing.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful to see people getting their heads around, because a lot of the guys in the UK, they play soccer. That's their main thing.
Yeah.
And so you see them trying to drop back in defence, or try and hang around what they think is the goal area. And so when you just introduce the basics of offside, where basically you've got to get behind the ball, and you've got to pass the ball backwards to go forwards, it's bewildering to them, but slowly they start to get it, and they get to see it, because we have really fantastic coaches who have very smart ways of making that happen. And it's remarkable how friendships develop so quickly. And this is what I mean about it being much more about employment. You see very, very powerful social bonds begin to develop. You see people start to encourage each other, to phone each other up, to say, where were you today? So they are the ones who kind of self-police the group. They start to feel more hopeful for the future. Their sense of self-efficacy grows, and there's so much that goes on.
It's such a brilliant concept behind all of it. But Ken, over the years now, what's the most common type of person that you've seen that's come along to do the course, and what sort of success rate has it had?
That's a great question, because first of all, in terms of what type of person, there is no such thing as your typical School of Hard Knocks participant. I mean, really, it never ceases to amaze me. People, I think, have a perception that it's guys who are, full-on gang members or criminals, but it's honestly not like that. We always, suppose if you get any group of young men who are unemployed between a certain age group, there is a chance that a certain number are going to have criminal records. Yeah. And that is always a barrier to some. But we have, of course, now we have 50% women on our courses as well as men. And that's been a great thrill for us to become more inclusive as a charity. And you just get every type of person. So even just in the last few months on various different courses we're running in Wales, London and Scotland, we've had some people who are trying to overcome drug addiction. We've had some women who we were not allowed to use their proper names or ever photograph them or give a clue as to where they are, because they were trafficked. They were trafficked sex workers. There's a local agency looking after them, and they just said, we think this will be really good for their self-esteem and give them a different outlook on life and start to be really cared for, and to start to interact, frankly, with men who were positive in their lives. and wanting to give something to them, which is, positive and wholesome. So even just that was a very, very powerful thing that was happening. We've had people with not a single qualification to their name. We have lots of people who struggle with literacy, numeracy. So you get the full spectrum of people with multiple barriers between where they are now and where they want to be in life. So there is no such thing, I don't think, as your typical. In terms of successes, again, that really varies. So generally, we're about 40% of people into work, and bearing in mind some of these people have serious barriers and are hard to reach. So in terms of a sense of hopefulness and mental health and well-being, we're people right up into the 90s feeling more hopeful for the future.
Wow.
Almost everyone who comes on the course feels as if they've made huge strides forward. A lot of people go back into education. A lot of people retrain. It's not just about getting people into a job. It's taking people forward.
Incredible. Now, Ken, as you mentioned a bit earlier, School of Hard Knocks, it has two separate programs, one which assists the school kids and the other the adults. The significant difference between the two is that the school course, like you said, is 3 years long, whereas the adults program is completed in 8 weeks. In what other ways do they differ? And at the same time, are there similarities they share in terms of how the program is structured?
I think the core similarity is that we are using values that are inherent within the sport, and our kind of core objectives are the same. So what we're doing on every single course, which is the same, and it's increasing self-control, it's increasing social bonds, and it's increasing people's levels of self-esteem or self-efficacy. So that runs through every single course that we do, whether it's rugby with adults. Sometimes we do some boxing and sort of fitness type courses in some areas of London where there aren't any rugby pitches, and with all of our schools it's rugby. So those three core pillars, if you like, are consistently the same. I think the difference between the adult and children work is the long-term needs. So our children are always close to Last Chance Saloon. These are children who have behavioural issues, or certainly a strong sense of disengagement from mainstream education. And if you remain in that way, then the chances are, your life chances are massively diminished. And so we need a long-term intervention. So the first big difference is the amount of time. And we feel that if we just do 8 weeks with children, a bit of rugby and a bit of mentoring, we're not going to make much difference, because they're at such a strong age of change in their thinking and in their bodies, and just in their general mental development as well, that we need consistent role models week in, week out. So we are there every school week, even during the summer. We're doing rugby sevens with them all through the school year. During the school day, we take them off curriculum for half a day. And the key difference is that our coaches are the same every single week. We ask our coaches to make a moral commitment to stay at least 1 year. Normally they want to stay forever, but we say, look, these children need consistency. They just don't have consistency in their lives, especially when it comes to male role models. And we also provide, which we don't have in the adult courses, behavioural coaches. We come in, we're on first name terms with the children. We're not teachers, we're not policemen, we're not social workers, we're not carers, and we're not parents who are often not very positive in their lives. And so we are just these people who come in and do rugby with them and give them a bit of happiness in their lives, who they can trust. What we have found is that a lot of the young people are disclosing things to us they haven't even disclosed to social workers or police or parents or teachers. And that puts an added, I think, stress on our staff. So we've had to provide a lot of safeguarding training to help equip our coaches to deal with the difficulties of that. So I think they're the key differences. We're working with all of our children, and we're in it for the long haul.
Fantastic. Now, Ken, why rugby? I mean, the course, as you mentioned, it is also done through boxing and strongman training. But what makes rugby so effective in helping transform these people's lives to go from being unemployed adults to finding sustained employment?
Such a good question. So for me, rugby, it provides several things. One, it provides great friendships. You don't always really like every single teammate that you have, but there is that moment, isn't there, when you step over that white line and you just go into battle against another team, and you'll do anything for your team. And that's a very forceful lesson to impose on people, just to say, look, here's the value of finding a context where you can make great friends, or even if you're not going to be great friends, great teammates who you learn to work with. And that is just an obvious lesson to learn in life if you're going to equip people for the rigors of the workplace, which it's often just the same, isn't it? You don't like all of your colleagues, but you just got to crack on and work with them. And if you can demonstrate to yourself and prove yourself that in just a short amount of time, in 8 weeks, that you can win the trust of other people and learn to work hard for them, then that's a very powerful thing. That's one thing about rugby. And you could say, well, you could have the same in any sport, but I think here's the difference. And it's the attritional side of the sport. It's the collision. It's physicality of it. For adults, I think it's about overcoming fear. Most negative behaviour is fear-driven. People are afraid of opening letters from the bank if they're in debt, so they just store them in the gas cupboard. People are maybe afraid of leaving gangs. People are often, they've experienced so much rejection from job applications, they're now fearful of applying for jobs. Those consequent behaviours are negative. They need to keep applying for jobs. They need to deal with financial issues. And so they need to learn to overcome fear in a positive way. This is just a kind of psychological way of demonstrating to them that if you overcome fear, that is actually a good thing for you. I think a lot of it for the children, but also a lot of the adults as well, is teaching people about conflict. So when you get a fight in a pub or on the street, or for children in a school playground, nothing good ever comes out of that. In rugby, you get physical collisions all the time. I mean, but there's something very different happening. So if you run into me, ball in hand, and I tackle you, then your first instinct isn't to, punch me on the nose and say, how dare you tackle me? Your instinct is to think about your team. And so you're saying, well, I've got to manage my body as I go to the floor so that the ball is presented to my own teammates. Then I've got to let go of the ball, and then I've got to get back on my feet. And me as a tackler, I'm thinking, I've got to release the players. I've got to roll away. I've got to get back on side. Got to get back in the game. And so the imposition of law, the laws of the game, provides a context whereby people can play, really physical, attritional game where there's these huge moments of conflict. So we can recalibrate the minds of young children when it comes to conflict. And we can say to them, you've gone through a whole morning today of pretty full-on of contact, and you haven't swung a punch, you haven't kicked off. That is brilliant. Imagine where, think back where you were 4 weeks ago. You'd have hit somebody for that, and now you got on with the game. So then you challenge them. Then you say, if you can do that in this rugby session, can you just get through the rest of the day without getting into a fight? Because you've proven to me that you can do that. So you can control your emotions. So for me, that is rugby. It's about overcoming fear. It's about creating powerful teams. And it's also about the self-control. Yeah,
and it's so wonderful how these values and traits and skills that they transfer so well into teaching the kids and adults these valuable life lessons. Now, Ken, the charity, it is based in London, but it has expanded all over the UK and is even in New Zealand. Are you surprised at all by how quickly it has spread, or was it a bit of a process to get people and other organizations on board and convince them that what School of Hard Knocks is doing is remarkable?
One thing we haven't talked about is that in that very first School of Hard Knocks course, a friend of mine in Sale Sharks, he contacted Sky Sports and he said to the then exec producer of rugby there, Martin Turner, there's a really interesting thing happening in Sky up in Liverpool, Knowsley area. You might be interested in this. So sure enough, they came along and they filmed it. And then they said a few months later, this went down well with the rugby viewing public. Are you going to do it again? And I didn't have any plans at the time, but we quickly decided we'd do another program, another course, and they came and filmed it. And then they filmed it again. So we ended up doing 9 series with Sky Sports. And it was only after the 3rd series that we started to think, I started to think with 1 or 2 friends, including the England scrum half, Andy Gomersall, he was key in that discussion, that we should be setting this up as a not-for-profit. And so it was although our first School of Hard Knocks was in 2008, the charity itself started in 2012. So I think one of our big barriers we've had to overcome, although the exposure on Sky has been really good for us starting conversations with people, it's been overwhelmingly difficult at times to get people to realise that we're not just a TV programme on Sky, or that people have assumed that if we are a charity that we are funded by Sky and that we're a Sky Sports charity, neither of which is true. We are a very small, punching above our weight charity based in London. So I am thrilled by the way it's grown. We're now in Cardiff and Valleys, Newport, Glasgow, Edinburgh. We just started the course in Fife. And so I'm thrilled at that. And we're now in 16 different schools across those regions as well. But I'm also, slightly impatient as well, because I want as many people who know School of Hard Knocks to know that it's a charity, that it's in need of support.
Now, Ken, as CEO of the charity, I mean, what does your daily responsibilities entail, and what are some of the challenges that you experience personally along the way?
I have an amazing team of coaches, and also I have my sort of right-hand man, Jack Lewis, who is just phenomenally gifted when it comes to operations and just really looking after the detail. We also have fantastic trustees as well. Debs Griffin, who's the women's rep for World Rugby, is our chair, and she's phenomenal at that. We have a very smart group of business ambassadors as well who help us in different ways. So we have some great support, but of course, day to day, I have to be ultimately responsible for safeguarding of children and make sure that's being done well and responsibly, for training of staff to make sure that our delivery in the front line as we grow doesn't get, that the quality doesn't lesser at any point. We don't have a fundraising team, so I'm also responsible, along with Jack and our other regional directors, to do all the fundraising. So, we're constantly out talking to different people, whether they're individual donors or maybe some wealthy individuals or businesses, about the charity and how we very much need the support of people out there to keep this work not just growing, but just maintaining. There's never a dull day, I'll put it that way.
Well, Ken, I'm now interested to know, and I'm sure listeners are too, if there's perhaps a particular story that you could share of an individual who completed the course and is now a completely different person. I'm sure you have many of those stories, but is there someone or a few people that stand out for you in particular?
Can I be indulgent and mention two?
Yeah,
I
sure.
promise to be quick.
No,
Great.
go for it.
Okay, so one about a child. A couple of almost 18 months ago now, a boy came to one of our. I'll change his name. We call him Jamal in School of Hard Knocks, but we change the names of the children. He came along, and his school in East London asked if he could come onto our course, not because his behaviour was bad, but because he's just utterly bewildered. He'd not long come over. He was a Syrian refugee, had been in the Calais jungle with just his brother, and during the chaos of the Calais jungle living, he lost his brother. Sure. He still to this day does not know whether his mum and dad are alive or not. He came to this country not knowing the language, not even really knowing where he was, not knowing what to do, not knowing where his family were, and so of course he's completely bewildered, young lad of 14 and 15. Sure. So he came on the course, and then one of the great things that he said to one of our coaches at the end of the first year was that this is the only hour in his week that he really looks forward to, the bit when he's just out there on the rugby pitch training. And she said, my colleague Cheska, who's a behavioural coach, she was saying that he just had this massive grin on his face as soon as he stepped onto the pitch. So he's with us for a couple of years, and we just two things happened. One, Cheska started to ask the question, why can't he find his brother? Are there agencies who specialise in that kind of thing? So we looked at some other partner organisations who look to reunite family members who are refugees and lost from each other. And he actually found his brother, which is fantastic. Yeah. And so he was reunited with his brother. But the amazing thing is, in just a short amount of time, just in a couple of years, he has really grasped the language. And now he's in sixth form college doing A-levels, and he wants to go to university. And that is down to his educators and his teachers, but it's definitely down to our coaches as well, and behavioural coaches who just worked with him week on week on week for a few years, just helping him feel more hopeful for the future. And that's just one little snapshot of many, many hundreds of children who are helped weekly. In terms of adults, it's more of a group story, really. This is something that moves me consistently, and I talk about it a lot, because in 2015 we did a Welsh course, which was actually filmed by Sky, and there's one boy on there, Paul, who'd never played rugby before. He was massively overweight. The guy was like 24 odd stone, and so by the end of the final game, which we did at the Arms Park over in Cardiff, he couldn't play a full game, but he came on for the last 10 minutes. So there was a massive crowd there. They really cheered when he came on, and he caught the ball, ran with it. He loved it. It's one of the best days of his life. We also managed to get him his first ever job. And this guy was engaged, and he had a little baby, so it was critical for him that he got a job. The tragedy is that 9 months later, he contracted cancer, which was basically incurable. And so these boys who, society will often look at our typical School of Hard Knocks cohort and say that, wouldn't trust this lot if your life depends upon it. Keep your eye, look out for your wallets, and all the rest of it. They come out with all these cliches about how they're losers or scum or whatever. And these boys, with barely a penny between them, decided to do some fundraising for Paul to be able to go on his honeymoon before he knew he was going to die. The tragedy is that he did die before he even went on honeymoon. But here's a powerful story. They wheeled him, these lads wheeled him down the aisle to get married. And just a matter of weeks later, the same lads carried his coffin down the aisle at his own funeral. But they still carried on doing the fundraising. They did another fundraiser just a few weeks ago, 18 months after his death, so that his family can afford a headstone for his grave. It's just phenomenal what happens when people go through this course. These boys have just come together and done something utterly remarkable for a young widow and her child.
Wow. Phenomenal stories, Ken. Let me just catch my breath there for a moment. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and our listeners. Ken, as you know, School of Hard Knocks, it's a charity partner of the Rugby Business Network, and we're so proud to be associated with your organisation. In your opinion, though, what makes this partnership work?
Do you know what? What I love about the Rugby Business Network is Column's completely changed the way I think about any sort of meeting, because, running a young charity, we started off with quite a cap-in-hand mentality, going into every meeting saying, I wonder if you could do this for us, I wonder if you could do that for us. But Colin Hannon, the founder, always starts every meeting by saying, you introduce yourself and you say, and what can we do for you? And that's fundamentally changed the way I meet anyone new for the first time. I always make sure we say, what can we do for you? We're helped this week by a team of super talented people from Penguin Publishing, biggest publishing house in the world. And yet still, we ended the day by saying, look, guys, this is a serious offer. What can we do for you? If you think of anything, please let us know. And so that's been a real lesson I've learned from RBN. But it's also just given us a great opportunity to meet with some people who are often very successful in their business lives. It's a very wide-ranging group of people, but who are passionate about the sport and they just understand it. They just get it. They get the values inherent within the game. And that is priceless for us to be part of that. So we've made some great friends. We've had some wonderful opportunities, but we've learned some great lessons as well.
Phenomenal. Well, finally, Ken, before we end off the podcast, how can the RBN members, the businesses, offer their support and assistance to the School of Hard Knocks? What are the areas of the charity which often need the most attention?
Well, I think to be candid, funding is always our biggest area of need. But to just be a little perhaps smarter about that, there are elements sometimes where we need somebody's help in terms of understanding marketing or sales or design, or there's whole sorts of things. There's some people who say, look, our business can't necessarily do much to help you financially, but I do know of somebody who really wants to be seen to be sponsoring women's rugby in the next couple of years. So how about an introduction over a coffee? That sort of thing is really priceless to us. Just the power of that network would be wonderful. And just to keep an eye out, generally, we're going to start our first ever campaign called Friends of School of Hard Knocks. This next year, we start in September, and our aim is to sign up 5,000 friends of School of Hard Knocks, giving £3 a month for the next, for in perpetuity, really. And we're looking for ambassadors. We're looking for club or business ambassadors who'll say, do you know what? I'll reach out for you, to my network, to my friends. We'd love people from RBN to become a club ambassador. So always happy to have that conversation. But generally, I just love meeting people. So I'm up for meeting anybody for a beer or a coffee and just talk about the work. And again, in the spirit of RBN, asking that question, and how can we help you?
Well, I'm sure some of our listeners will be able to help out, and all they got to do is go to the website www.schoolofhardknocks.org.uk, and they'll obviously get in touch with you to see how they can provide some of their assistance. Well, Ken, School of Hard Knocks, it's such an amazing charity, and the impact it's making in not just schools but also in communities is absolutely phenomenal. Keep up the amazing work, and thank you for joining us on the Rugby Business Network podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
As well as connecting business people to each other, the Rugby Business Network helps rugby-related charities to meet business people. We also run our own Life After Rugby program, which helps pro and ex-pro players for free to transition from pro rugby to business via work placements or jobs, or starting their own businesses. Visit therugbybusinessnetwork.com today and help rugby to help people.